What is up, everybody? What is up today? What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel today. I wanted to begin a discussion that all kind of stems from the changes that were made to Black Widow in lowering her signature ability. And I have been asked many times and throughout the community, live streams and in videos, I have seen asked many times if Black Widow is still the best for lowering defensive ability accuracy, or if now Crossbones or Elektra has kind of taken her place there. And the answer to that, I'm not sure, is quite as black and white as the community would like it to be. I have done quite a bit of testing over the last couple of days, trying to put the characters in different situations and think through, every scenario that I could to come up with an exact answer for you. Basically, I took my Black Widow from 550, moved her down to 440 so that she would match both Crossbones and Elektra, so it was kind of an even playing field there, and did some testing. So if you're not aware, defensive ability accuracy, by lowering it, you're removing the chance for things like Poison with Abomination to trigger, things like Evasion for Spider-Man and Nightcrawler to trigger. Electro was the biggest one for a long time in Alliance Wars. If you had a max signature level Black Widow, you wouldn't take any damage coming back to you from Electro's static shock. Same thing with the Thorns nodes in Alliance Wars. Black Widow could get around all of that. So what they've done, if you haven't taken the time to read, is they've moved her max signature level from 100% defensive removal down to 70% flat rate at signature level 99. And if you're going up against the Science Champion, they give you an additional 15% for your class bonus, your class advantage. And if you're going against a mutant, they're going to decrease that by 15%. So that's going to take you all the way down to 55%. So that really is kind of what has triggered the whole discussion. And hopefully I will be able to at least give you some direction on which champ is probably best in the overall situation. So let's get into it. So the very first thing that I wanted to look at is how good are these characters individually at lowering the defensive ability accuracy. And I know what the hard numbers say, but sometimes when you actually play a character, it can actually can tell a totally different story from what the percentages are. So I'm not looking here necessarily at how hard the characters are hitting, or even if I defeat the Abomination that you see here. I'm just wanting to see if I'm playing the game normally, like I would be in Alliance Wars or in questing or anything. How good are these characters at not triggering that? And I think that this is probably an over-the-top exaggeration, just because when you do trigger the poison effect from Abomination, it does hit so hard. I think it's like an additional 40%. This is the Road to the Labyrinth. 3.6, I believe, is where it's at. But I think what I found is I was really surprised, I think, at how consistent Crossbones was. If you are not aware, for each Fury effect that you have on Crossbones, he reduces the defensive ability accuracy by 22%. And when you start a fight, if you swipe back and you hold for 2.5 seconds, you go into an overrun state, which automatically gives you 3 stacks. So from the get-go, you can basically get 66%, and probably within the first 5-hit combo, that is going to be well over a 4 or 5 stack. So you're easily talking 80% or higher. I'm over 40 hits into the fight here, and I think I've got 1 poison effect on me so far, which is really pretty good, to be honest. I have not spent a whole lot of time playing with Crossbones, and I always thought that I would have a hard time keeping the Fury effects kind of built up. But really, I mean, outside of trying to bait out specials and you can just swipe back, go into overrun again, it was really easy to keep those stacks high. I think my count for 83 hits was just 2 poison effects, which, quite frankly, I was very impressed with. Now, Elektra on paper, she's got an 85% defensive ability accuracy, lowering it by 85%, I should say, as long as there's a debuff on the enemy. And basically, your debuffs you're talking about is she's either going to cause a bleed, or if it's a bleed immune champ, when she uses a special, it's going to cause an armor break. And this is kind of one of those cases where I think the percentages and the actual gameplay tell 2 different stories. the problem is during gameplay, you have to constantly be baiting out specials and you have to evade, and that eats up so much of the time that you have a debuff on the enemy when you're talking about the bleed. Um, and again, the poison kind of magnifies the problem that I have with Elektra, but when we're just talking about how good are these characters at not triggering these defensive abilities, that 85% is actually active for such a, I don't want to say small amount of time, but in the overall fight, it's probably only active for like 50% of the fight. So, not that impressed, to be totally honest with you. That fight, that was probably the third or fourth time I had run that. It was basically the same every single time. I could not get my bleed effects stacked kind of with specials in a row there long enough to do any real damage. I just kept triggering the poison and just couldn't get very far into the fight, unfortunately. And then last but not least is Black Widow, which my particular Black Widow, unfortunately, I have never been able to even pull her once for a full dupe. So she is only at signature level 9. But even with that, she does have a 43% chance to lower defensive ability accuracy, and because I do have the class advantage, with the new update, you get an additional 15% on top of that. So it is basically, what is that, 58%, which I do realize, not every character that you go up against is going to, you're going to have the class advantage with, but this is just kind of the character that I had and the character that I was going to use for the testing. The thing to keep in mind here is that with Black Widow, there is no debuff effect that you need to try to keep up. There are no stacks of anything. You don't need to swipe back and hold. You just kind of plug and play. And I don't think that can be overstated how important that is. Maybe not if you are a more experienced player and you've been playing for a long time. But if you are newer and just trying to learn how to evade, learning how to bait out specials, you really don't necessarily need another layer of difficulty added on top of that. And with Black Widow, she kind of is the baseline. She's got good damage. She's got a good crit rate. She really, even with the kind of nerf, if you want to call it, that they did to her, she still has got a very high chance to get around, these defensive ability accuracy. Which I think, what am I, like 80 hits into the fight? I think I've triggered poison once. Which, because I have seen this, I know I'm about to actually trigger it twice here. So 85 hits into the fight, I've triggered it 3 times, and I think it does actually end up killing me here fairly shortly. I think I get to 98 hits. But I was impressed, really. I mean, 98 hits and only triggering it 3 times with a signature level 9, I think is pretty good. So if I'm just stepping back and I'm merely looking at, how all 3 characters did in regards to how good are they at not triggering debuffs, then I would have to say that I think obviously Crossbones and Black Widow, I think I would have them kind of neck and neck. And again, purely from an effectiveness point, I think Elektra, I've got kind of a distant second/third, whatever you wanna say that is. So obviously there are several other aspects that you need to consider when you are trying to determine who you should take up. The defensive ability accuracy is very, very important to these characters, and it's one of the main reasons why you want to have them. But you also want to have a character that can be effective in other fights that don't necessarily have abilities that you're trying to work around. And so you want somebody who's got decent utility, somebody who can stay alive, and somebody who does good damage. And when it comes to damage, Black Widow for me has fallen back pretty far. She took a pretty hard hit, seems like anyways, in regards to her critical damage output. For me, Crossbones is probably going to be doing the most consistent good damage across the board throughout the fight. And then I think towards the end of the fight, Elektra is probably going to pass him, obviously, because of her assassin abilities. She's going to be hitting a lot harder. So between the two, my preference would be that I do from the start more consistent damage with the Fury buffs. So that is the character that I would take up. From a utility standpoint, Crossbones also has the ability to shrug off debuffs. which is going to help keep you alive longer. Also makes him a more difficult champ to play against in Alliance Wars on defense if you wanted to put him in there. He's still a good champ for that as well. But armor rating, Crossbones has got more armor rating than both Black Widow and Elektra. He also has more health than both Black Widow and Elektra, which for having them all at 440, it's about 2,000 points, which isn't a ton. You know, endgame content that's basically one hit. But, you know, every little bit counts, and I think a more important thing to be aware of, or to keep in mind, I should say, is that if you're bleeding, you know, or you have a poison effect or a degeneration, you know, having that extra 2,000 points to pull from is going to help quite a bit in keeping your champion alive. In addition to that, the more health points you have, the more willpower you are getting back, because that's a percentage of your overall health. So from the utility standpoint, I think Crossbones probably comes out ahead there as well. Really, I think probably the picture that I'm trying to convey here is that for my money, and my suggestion would be to take up Crossbones. If Black Widow did not have the handicap of going up against mutant champions, because that really hits her pretty hard. I mean, at max signature level 99, she's going to be going from 70% all the way down to 55%, which is quite a big hit. So for Alliance Wars, you're not going to be able to really take her in with a whole lot of confidence any longer. But kind of across the board, Crossbones is going to be able, you know, regardless of class advantage or disadvantage, she's going to have really good ability to get around those defensive abilities. He does good damage, has good utility. He can be used in Alliance Wars on defense as well because of his ability to shrug off stuns and parries. So for my money, like I said, he's probably the one I would recommend to you. I mean, really, we're just splitting hairs here. They're all three really good characters to take up, and ultimately, if you are really good at playing one, you know, their animations you're really comfortable with, you can intercept every single time, you're just comfortable playing with them, then I would say it's probably not worth downranking and trying to learn somebody new. I would say just stay with what is, you know, what you're best at. But if you, you know, you're kind of in a situation like me and they're all three sitting at the same level and you're needing to take one up to have them, I would take Crossbones just because he's going to be good in all aspects: Alliance Wars, questing, Alliance questing. He's not going to be hampered by any sort of class disadvantage, and he can shrug off debuffs. So all of those things put together, I think, is what is pushing Crossbones for me kind of to the top of this list. Alright, I hope that this was in some way a help to you as you're trying to make your decision here. Ultimately, don't take any of my advice before you actually go out and play with the characters. You may find that you absolutely hate one character and love another, and because this is a video game and we do it for fun, then I would take up that character. Play with the character that you enjoy playing with the most, ultimately. Alright guys, as always, I appreciate all the support. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Make sure that you follow me over on Twitter. I usually respond the quickest over on Twitter if you have any questions for me there. Alright, until the next video, have a great day everybody. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Traveling the road less known is where I wanna be. My compass directing, electing an open road with golden traveling.